Most advice for getting rid of spotted lanternflies requires a lot of manual intervention, like setting traps or hanging upside down in your trees and scraping their eggs off. But there's a much easier way to kill lanternflies, and it's in this garden right here. This garden is designed to kill spotted lanternflies, all while attracting you more butterflies, bees, and birds. So let's talk about the design of these gardens and how to make them work in your space. So there's actually two things going on in this garden that make it a spotted lanternfly death trap. And the first one is this flower, milkweed. One of the biggest worries when spotted lanternflies came to the US has been agricultural losses, and especially with grapes. Apparently, spotted lanternflies love grapes. But after hearing people say that they were finding spotted lanternflies dead under their milkweed plants, Penn State actually did a study where they surrounded a grape vineyard with plantings of common milkweed to see what happens. Milkweed is toxic to most animals, but spotted lanternfly ain't from around here, so they actually don't know that. And those poor turkeys ate it up. The study found that the milkweed killed 60 to 80% of spotted lanternflies, both nymphs and adults, and usually within about 24 hours. So for our first trick, we're going to include a diversity of milkweed plants in this garden. I've included 3 different milkweed species in this garden. They're 3 of my personal favorites. The first one is butterfly milkweed. This one stays a little bit more compact, something like 2 feet tall. It makes beautiful orange flowers, and this one has more dense foliage than some other species of milkweed. That can be very helpful if you're seeing monarchs laying eggs. On some of the species of milkweed in my own garden, the monarch caterpillars completely defoliated my plants this year, and I was actually carrying caterpillars from the top of my garden on my rose milkweed down to where I have my butterfly milkweed to try to make sure that those poor little darlings did not starve to death. So butterfly milkweed is one that I personally have had a lot of really good experience with. It's a great garden plant, makes beautiful flowers. It's constantly covered in butterflies, bumblebees, and it makes so much foliage, both that will be beneficial for monarchs as well as other species. There's a milkweed tussock moth, I think it's called, that I usually see on my butterfly milkweed plants. And all that foliage is poisonous to spotted lanternflies. So I've included the butterfly milkweed along the front edge of this garden, again, because it's a fairly compact and well-behaved plant. It makes a nice border. Towards the back, I've included something called purple milkweed. This has a really beautiful, bold purple flower. Also, again, you're going to see a ton of bumblebees and butterflies. And I believe that this one is actually endangered over much of its range. So it's both stunning, and you would be helping to support an endangered plant species, at least reestablishing as much as possible in some of our garden spaces. This one grows a little bit taller, more like 3 feet, so I've included it towards the back of the garden. And then I've included a third species called world milkweed, WHORLED, world. This one has a really different type of foliage. It's very pretty and a really pretty texture. This one has really pretty white to almost greenish flowers. This one can handle really sandy or rocky soils, and it's very comfortable with dry soils. So this one will be really drought tolerant for us. It is considered one of the more poisonous of the milkweeds, at least in terms of livestock. And so hopefully this one will really help us to take out those spotted lanternflies. And I forgot to mention, I had hummingbirds on my butterfly milkweed this year. That was really cool to see. So hopefully you'll see a lot of pollinator activity, and this garden can be full of life, even though it's murdering lanternflies. Okay, so we've included some poisonous plants that the spotted lanternflies are going to really go after, and it's going to literally just drop them dead. And there's a second way that this garden is going to work to kill spotted lanternflies, and it looks like this. When lanternflies were first introduced to the US, people were worried that they would have absolutely no natural predators. But there have been a lot of observations of birds and insects eating spotted lanternflies. One of the important ways to help birds eat spotted lanternflies, first to attract birds to our garden. So we want to have habitat and food for them. But we also want to look for any tree of heaven that might be growing on our property. The reason we want to remove tree of heaven is that it actually, it's an invasive species just like the spotted lanternfly. It is from the same regions of Asia, and it's one of the preferred hosts for spotted lanternflies. And they actually absorb a compound from tree of heaven that makes them taste very bitter, and that is off-putting to birds. It can be a little bit tricky to identify tree of heaven. It looks quite a bit like walnut, or even, why can I never remember the common name? Walnut is one lookalike, and sumac is another. But apparently Tree of Heaven, when you crush the leaves, has like a really gross, like rotting, I think it was, how was it described? Rotting peanut butter. Let's see what it says. Rancid peanut butter smell. So if you have a tree on your property that looks like it could be Tree of Heaven, you can crush up the leaves and see if it smells like rancid peanut butter, and that will help you to make a clean ID. There are a ton of different kinds of plants that we can include in our gardens to attract birds. And then I want to also mention that we can hang feeders either nearby or also inside this garden. I don't recommend hanging a feeder unless you're also providing habitat for birds and hopefully some natural food resources through your plants. So two of the food sources that we're going to include in this garden are seed-bearing grasses that birds will eat, as well as berry-producing shrubs that birds will eat. So we have the structure that we're getting in this garden in the front is coming from a short, really pretty ornamental native grass called prairie dropseed. This is a really great plant to add just some organization and structure, and it stays very neat and compact. It's not a spreader. So this is a great one for if you have a grumpy neighbor. It'll basically shield the outside edge of this garden to keep it looking really neat and organized. I've also included some little blue stem. This is one of my favorites. I love watching it change in the seasons, and I get a ton of birds eating the seeds from the little blue stem in my garden. All of these are also really drought tolerant as well. So once this garden is established, you should have pretty minimal maintenance in order to keep this garden looking nice. And the other food source I included in this garden are berry-producing shrubs. Some of the birds that have been observed eating spotted lanternflies are big berry lovers, including cardinals, warblers, catbirds. Every time I come outside and look at my dogwoods, there are fewer and fewer berries on them. So, and usually I see catbirds in the trees eating them. So, it is a big garden, but it's also kind of a small garden in terms of the size of an average shrub. So I've only included two, but as many gardens as you can start to fold in berry producing shrubs that the birds can use. You'll get lots of nesting habitat as well as good quality food for them, which becomes really important, especially in the fall and winter. So I've included beautyberry up in the front. This makes a really beautiful kind of purple magenta berry, just covers the branches. The other berry producing shrub that I've included in here is red twig dogwood. This is a plant that I am really excited to start folding into our own gardens. It produces berries that are really high in calcium. So this is really important for mommy birds after they've spent all season laying eggs. Dogwoods are basically their berries that are tailored for them. They can recharge their calcium levels by eating these berries. Red twig dogwood is truly beautiful in the winter time. It has these really bright red stems that it'll lose its leaves, but then these beautiful stems will become visible. To keep it looking really sharp in the winter, there are some different pruning techniques that you can use. The one that I think I'm planning to try to use is where you cut out about 50%, 30 to 50% of the stems each year. So the ones that are looking less and less red, you would cut those ones out. It's a pretty vigorous grower, so it'll rebound very quickly. But then when it produces the fresh stems, those will be nice and bright red again. And so every year you would just come through and prune out 30 to 50% of the older branches and keep promoting that beautiful red branch growth. Okay, so if you go to the link in the pinned comment, you can actually download this garden design. I've tried to make it a very simple design in hopes that it could be pretty adaptable for a lot of spaces. It's a simple sort of half circle garden shape. My hope in making it this shape is that it could be something that you could sort of butt up against your driveway, the edge of your driveway, or a sidewalk. For this, I just grabbed a stock photo of a house. So in deciding where to place it for this particular house, I've essentially gone to the side of the house that's imbalanced. So if you look at the way that this house is, sort of the profile of this house, we have this sort of heavy side on the right where the house is taller than on the left. And so if I were to put this garden on the right side of the driveway, it would sort of continue to weigh down that heavy side. Whereas if we put it on the left side, it sort of both frames the entrance to the garage, and then it also helps to balance out that heaviness of the house on the right side. So for the second garden, I was thinking in particular of those of us who have trees that are infested with spotted lanternflies. I've got a silver maple here that is just disgusting. It's completely covered in sap. Black mold is growing on everything, and my shade garden underneath is covered in black mold. Some of the plants that I have under there really were struggling to photosynthesize because of all of the mildew that was growing on the sap that the spotted lanternflies were raining down on us. So if you have a situation like that, this is a garden that could go underneath of your tree and hopefully serve as a trap for those spotted lanternflies that are going up into your tree and invading it. So this is just a simple full circle garden. There is, I think, only one species of milkweed that grows in the shade. Pretty sure that's true. I'll double check. But it's called poke milkweed. This is a shade tolerant milkweed that produces white flowers. It would still be bringing in that poisonous foliage, lots more monarch habitat. And so the way I've designed this garden is to essentially put that poke milkweed towards the back of the garden. And it will sort of frame out the backdrop of this garden. There are lots of beautiful shade tolerant plants that we can include in this garden. One of the big challenges to building gardens of these size is cost. So a flower I would really recommend if you are on a budget, which who is not, is red columbine. I planted 3 red columbines, I think it was last spring, and now I probably have 20. I'll show some of the little sprouts back there. So you could even just plant one of these and hopefully you'll see a lot of offspring, and you can start to move them around and fill out the space really readily. It's an early bloomer, so when you're depressed at the end of winter and you really want to see some color, it'll be there for you. Beautiful little adorable, almost like clover-like leaves, and it gets a pretty fall color as well. This is a great one to also plant for the hummingbirds. Sometimes when they come up from the south in the spring, there's not much available for them to eat. So greeting them with the red columbine is a great way to support hummingbirds in your garden. And they have excellent memories, so they will be back. If you reward them, they will come over and over again. It can be really hard to find the red columbine in my experience. There's all these different cultivars of different colors, but I would say put in that extra effort to try to find the native red species, the straight species, because that's the one that the hummingbirds will most readily recognize. Another really compact, tidy little perennial is wild geranium. I have seen nothing but rave reviews about wild geranium, so I bought a group of them in Bare Roots. I think that was 2 years ago, and I've been using them to border a garden at the top of the hill here. They also have a really beautiful fall color, and they bloom for quite a long time in the spring. If they're in a lot of sun, they'll start to suffer towards the end of the summer. But in a shade garden like this, you should see really nice, healthy plants that hopefully will keep their foliage through most of the summer. I have seen some offspring from my wild geraniums as well, so you might also be able to get away with just a few, just purchasing a few plants and expanding the garden as you get more seeds and can reproduce these. And a third plant I have included in this garden, because it is, again, providing a really nice structure similar to the grasses that we had in the sun garden, is blue-eyed grass. These can be a little bit more expensive. I have had them show up for free. So if you can get some more areas of your garden where you're not mowing, you might start to see more volunteers. And I've seen other people respond to a video where I posted about getting this volunteer blue-eyed grass in my own garden, that they had the same experience. So these may be wanting to show up in your garden naturally. Blue-eyed grasses are actually in the iris family, so they have really nice, well-structured foliage that looks almost like grasses, stay really compact, and then they have these really sweet little blue and purple flowers that I see a lot of mining bees on in the spring especially. So I've kept it simple with just those 4 plants in this area, but really any shade plant that you would enjoy could go in this garden. There are different options for putting traps around a tree like this. So if you have a tree that's getting inundated with spotted lanternflies, you can look for trap options. Some of them are not terribly safe for other wildlife. Things like the sticky traps are completely indiscriminate, so you might get, I've heard even birds can get caught in those. I tried a trap that is sort of a funnel shape. So spotted lanternflies have a habit of going up and down the trees every day. And so a lot of the traps that you'll see are trying to catch them basically as they're like migrating. up and down your tree. For a large tree, I don't think those kind of traps are going to really make a big dent. So I maybe caught 30 or 40 spotted lanternflies, but I probably have 1,000 more up in that tree, that gross tree over there. So I don't think the traps are probably a great option at scale. If you have a small tree that you're worried is in danger, it's young and vulnerable, a trap might be a good way to protect a smaller young tree. But for a large tree that has a real infestation problem, I think you're going to need helpers like these types of plantings that will be working to kill your spotted lanternflies while you're doing your day job. Insecticides also are working against us. So one of the problems that we see when we have these invasive species is that we already have a really degraded environment. We don't have like a robust ecosystem that can absorb and mitigate those invasive species. And so we see these sort of runaway populations, especially early on before things can come into balance. When we spray things like pesticides, this is only making things worse. You already have a degraded ecosystem, and now you are indiscriminately spraying poisons on it. It's going to damage all of the wildlife that comes in contact with. So in terms of manual interventions, things like traps and insecticides, I would really kind of not waste the money on those. I think if we can foster gardens that have lots of wildlife, we'll just naturally see these populations start to get absorbed and things to come back in balance. And hopefully our gardens won't be covered in poopy mildew anymore. So this video shows a few ways that we can start to attract more birds to our garden spaces. But there are a ton more plants that you can include in your garden that will feed your local birds year round. If you want to learn more, watch this video next.